Coming round faster than Tom Dumoulin can remove his cycling shorts, it's another edition of Ask GC Anything, where you ask and we answer, or we try to anyway. And first up, without further ado, is this question from Stuart at MTB_Stuart, who asks, I'm an MTB rider who recently got into road cycling. I love dry roads, but I lack confidence in the rain. Any advice? #talkback. Well, thanks for getting in touch, Stuart. It is a really good question, especially coming off the driest Grand Tour in living memory. Of course, no rain graced this year's Giro d'Italia, but if you're used to the fantastic control and traction offered by off-road wider tyres, it can definitely be a bit of a shock when you go from the wider tyres onto the skinny road counterparts. Remember, only 23, 25, 28 mil. It's a massive difference, especially when riding in the wet. Firstly, there's a completely different feel, and I think primarily there's hardly any room for kind of error at all. So yeah, what you have to do is just get used to riding them, to just slowly but surely improve your confidence. So practice makes perfect, basically. But also what you need to do is factor in some other things that will make it far easier for you. So looking at your braking distances, and really importantly, making sure you've got your tyre pressure spot on, especially don't have your tyres too hard, otherwise you will come off. And in addition, you could watch this video too, our top 10 tips for riding in the rain.
This to a degree, and that is to make sure you brake in good time before the corners. Now, braking before corners is something we always mention, but in the wet, definitely back off that little bit more, because the last thing you want to do is grab some brakes midway through the corner, because you're going to really increase the risk of wiping out and crashing.
Well, next up we have this question from Prashant Pradham, who asks, can you recommend a training plan one can follow whilst working around a full-time job? Well, firstly, thanks very much for getting in touch, Prashant. And unsurprisingly, this is a question we get asked pretty much every single week, because let's face it, hardly any of us are full-time pros who have 9-10 hours a day to train. So we really need to think about how we manage our time. Because other small things get in the way, like your study, as you say, a full-time job, just family life. And getting the balance right can be quite hard, because the strain that you put on your body, both physically and psychologically, can mean if you get it wrong, something will fail, either your training or even your quality of life, the quality of the work you're doing. So the key thing for working on training, around a full-time job is effective time management. So once you've got that right, that's one thing. Then also making sure that each and every training session has a meaning and counts. But the overriding one when working and training is to get enough rest. They're the main three component parts, which I'll look at in a bit more detail in this video. Get fitter. So rather than just aimlessly riding your bike without any real focus, although from time to time that can actually be quite enjoyable, try and make sure that every single session counted. I actually managed to keep the same level of fitness when I was working full-time compared to when I was a full-time professional, simply because my training was of far higher quality. There simply were no dead miles, so to speak. It's time now for the rapid fire round, but before I embark on this midsection of this show, I noticed last week that Cy did say that he was going to make rapid fire particularly rapid, but let's be honest, and a few of you did comment, it was one of the slowest rapid fire rounds I've ever seen. So I'm going to try and speed things up properly, starting from now. This question from Hitesh Durhawaja, if I got that wrong, I apologise. He asked, in light of the Bolide video, that was the TT bike video from Team Sky, why do pro riders not just completely get custom frames with fixed saddle heights, etc.? It's a cracking question. The main reason is cost. It costs a hell of a lot of money to get a carbon mould done. I mean, an extraordinary amount of money. So basically, the vast majority of pros buy the same frames and bikes that we can. It's just a matter of cost. Although there are a few professional riders, I mean, probably you can count them on one hand, who do get custom road bikes, but they are the real minority, and it's just a matter of cost. I think I need to speed things up. Next question, here we go. Jure van der Weyer asks, are there pros who listen to music during their races? Not that I'm aware of. Next up we have this from Brian Foley. Why did Nibali do that aggressive bunny hop approaching the downhill hairpin bend? And I think, Brian, you're referring to the stage that finished in Bormio, descending down the Stelvio, and the little section you're referring to, I think Nibali basically did a bunny hop to jump over some ice melt water that was running across the road so he didn't make his tyres wet. Simple as that. He's a classy descender, you've got to handle his bike very well. Little bunny hop over the water. Next up from Saif Akhtar. Hi GCN, do you have any advice on racing on a circuit and any tactics or strategies. Racing on a circuit, first up, do loads of interval training, a lot of high-end stuff, a lot of sprints, try to improve your threshold. But also, when you're actually racing on the circuit, don't do too much work. It's very, very high intensity. If you hit the wind too early, you'll pay for it. So basically, high intensity work, improve your sprinting, don't get in the wind too much. And finally, this is from Liam Sangakow. Why don't professional cyclists do criteriums? They do. Caleb Ewan, for example, is the Aussie national criterium champion. The pros do them, just not as much. There you go. How did I do? I reckon 4 out of 5 for speed. Straight off the back of the rapid fire round, let's slow things down a little bit with this question from Phil Tromans over on Twitter, who asks, how important are head units and power meters in the modern peloton, and how would things change if they weren't allowed? Well, thanks, Phil. That is a really, really good question, a very interesting one, in fact. Now, I think they are important to the pros, that is, for a number of reasons, but the most obvious one, and the kind of reason that causes most controversy, because it potentially detracts from the spontaneity of racing, is the fact that riders can see the amount of power on their head unit, so they basically ride to that power, making for a kind of quite a controlled environment, depending on the way you look at it. But on saying that, not all the riders in the peloton actually ride to power, but what I can say is, from experience, especially in this modern era, is that pretty much 100% of the riders in the peloton will collect the power data on the power meter. They might not look at it immediately, but what they will do is review it in conjunction with their coach after a training ride or after a race, and that really is important information. Information is power, if you get my drift. Now, as for your second part of the question, how would things change if power meters and head units weren't allowed? Well, I think that racing may be a little bit different. I don't know how different, because obviously riders wouldn't have the ability to ride to a set fixed number in front of them. They'd have to learn to ride on feel, which on one hand I think is a fantastic thing. I think young riders should understand their bodies better, although I do, on the other hand, understand the importance of data. And just to make things up a bit, I think in every Grand Tour there should be 2 or 3 stages where the riders can have power meters on, but they're not allowed to refer to their data. I'll just throw that one out there and see how that one goes. But just to look at what the riders actually look at on their head units, I spoke to a smattering of riders at the head of a beginning of a stage of the Giro d'Italia last year, and the answers are quite interesting and very varied. Not everybody rides to power.
Perfectly, yeah.
What data fields do you prefer when racing?
I've got speed, distance, average power, and time.
Good stuff. Why is that?
Well, seeing the current power is bad because I'm just going to look at it and get in my head and like, 500 watts. And average power, just I can kind of gauge like, oh yeah, it actually has been hard all day. But that does it for me.
Simon's explanation of the unwritten rules in last week's Ask GCN Anything has really caused some fantastic debate and interaction in our comment section with a really broad range of views, which is fantastic. But that is the very nub of this whole issue. The rules are unwritten, so therefore ambiguous and open to various different forms of interpretation given a specific set of circumstances, viewed of course by many different people. And that I think is the weird beauty of the unwritten rules, because what you have to consider is there's no case law that's rooted in statute or law to firm up any examples of breaches based on a very specific set of circumstances as there is in law. Now, loads of you got involved. I had a lot of fun actually reading through the comments. I'm just going to throw a couple of people out there, a couple of names, sorry. Joseph Bertie, Maxime de Klerk, Mick Buckley, Limited Gary, a kind chap, cracking name. There are numerous others, and I think this one will run and run, because every time there's a set of circumstances that unravel in a race and the unwritten rules are called into question, the whole thing is going to raise its head again. And I think what we have to look at is the whole, in relation to etiquette in the peloton, in relation to the unwritten rules, the whole thing is evolving as well, and there's different pressures in the modern peloton than there were, say, 50 or 60 years ago when the unwritten rules were first written, if you get my drift. So I just think it's a fantastic, fertile ground for debate and discussion about the sport that we all love. And on that very note, someone didn't throw to this video last week, so I'm going to do it now. It's my look at 5 of the unwritten rules of cycling. This is volume 1. You can also check out volume 2 as well. Enjoy, see what you think. The sticky bottle. Now this entails a rider grabbing a bottle as it's being passed to them from a moving team car. But rather than releasing their grip
immediately, they'll hold on to the bottle for a short while. Now, the unwritten rules allow for between 1 and 3 seconds, and anything above and beyond that, and it moves into the written rules territory. In other words, it moves from a sticky bottle to getting a toe. Well, that's it for another edition of Ask GCN Anything. Please do keep those questions coming. And if it's the first time you've watched this show, the hashtag to use on all platforms of social media, and of course in the comment section, is hashtag talkback with a Q. Now, if you haven't already subscribed to GCN, your one-stop shop for everything cycling. If you click on the globe for free, you will not miss another video. Make sure you do that now. And if you are heading up high this summer to do some riding, you might want to click on this video, how to ride at altitude. Or alternatively, or you could do both, how about clicking on this video where I took a peek inside a Grand Tour rider's suitcase. In this particular case, it was Simon Geschke, a teammate of the Giro winner Tom Dumoulin. Don't forget to like and share.